A lot of us have questions about the glory of God. We want to know, is it possible to take part in God's glory? Is it possible to see the glory of God? And is it possible for the glory of God to shine through us today? Many of us think that this was just for prophets back in the Old Testament days, or even in New Testament time, biblical times. But really, the glory of God is not only for those in the Bible, but the glory of God, we have access to that today. Now, Jesus gave instruction about this, about how to access His glory. And if you read in Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7, you're going to see that Jesus set Himself on a mountain and taught the people. He taught the multitude. He taught the multitude about basic life, how to live your life, how to build your character, and how to build your reputation. Now, a lot of us take these teachings really lightly, but you'll see that if you take these teachings that He teaches on the mountain and apply it to your life, it actually goes deeper than just the surface. Now, we're going to go through a few of them, a few things that Jesus spoke about in Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7. We can't go through them all. We don't have that time. But if we just go through a few of them very briefly, you will see the clues, the method of how to access God's glory. It's so easy. Let me show you. Let me open it up. Let me try to articulate this to you. Now, in Matthew chapter 5, He sets Himself and gets ready to teach the multitude. And one of the things that He points out that a lot of us talk about is love your enemies. He says, love your enemies. But He goes a little bit deeper than that. He says, you don't just love your enemies. He said, but you need to love the ones that want to destroy you. Love those ones. Now, the example that He gave of one trying to destroy you is, think of a person that wants to tear you apart so much that he wants to sue you. He wants to take the law and sue you for what you have. Now, this is the example that Jesus gave. He said, if somebody wants your clothes to sue you for your coat, He said, let them take your cloak also. In other words, don't fight for anything. When somebody wants to destroy you, He said, as long as you're in the Spirit, as long as you're trusting in the Spirit, He said, let the Spirit do its work and let the Spirit have your back. You don't got to worry about anybody trying to destroy you. He said, or take anything from you. We don't. If somebody wants to come and destroy you, let the Spirit take control and let the Spirit lead and guide you. You don't have to worry about that. Sometimes, for example, if somebody wants $1,000 to sue you for, let them take a $10,000 lawsuit on you. Don't worry about it. Love your enemies, even the ones that want to destroy you. Jesus goes on. He talks a little bit more about loving your enemies. Then He goes on. And He also talks about how there's a lot of people nowadays, on that time and even today, that spend a lot of time trying to build treasures on earth. And that's all they do. That's all they worry about is money. That's all they worry about is things. That's all they worry about is luxury. They worry about things that are going to pass away. He said, stop trying to build treasure on earth so much. The things that are needful, build it up. But things that take most of your time for treasures on earth, He said, don't do that. Build treasure in heaven. Build eternal things. He said, figure out ways of how you can build eternal things. Things that they won't rust, things that won't decay, things that'll never pass away. He said, but focus on those things. Figure out how to go deeper by building things that are eternal. Because one day, everything will pass away. It doesn't matter about the big house we have. It doesn't matter about the big boat we have or the big car or how much money we have in the bank. He's saying, don't spend so much time trying to build those things up, but focus on the eternal things that matter most. Now, He goes on. He talks about these things, more things. One other thing he talks about is worry. He says, quit worrying so much about life. Quit worrying so much about what you're going to eat today or what you're going to eat tomorrow. He said, quit worrying so much about the clothes that we don't have. We need clothes. What are we going to wear tomorrow? What are we going to do next month? How am I going to get that coat? How am I going to get those shoes? He says, stop worrying so much about those things. He said, because did you know, he said, that I even feed the fowls of the air? He said, if I could take care of the birds that don't even worry about it, he said, how much more are you worth? How much more do I want to feed you if you just stop worrying so much? So don't worry. He says, if the lilies of the valley, the plants and the roses are grown in their most beautiful state, he said, how much more will I clothe you? How much more will I give to you if you just trust me? If you just focus on me, he said, how much more do you think that I'll take care of you? So stop worrying. He goes on. He begins to teach more. And another thing he talks about that a lot of us have trouble with today. He says, quit judging so much. Quit judging people so much. Sometimes we got to focus on ourselves and stop judging people. See, during Jesus' time, he had a lot of trouble listening to the Pharisees and the scribes. They were so much focused on themselves that they judged other people. They judged them by their outward appearance because they had the right clothing on and they had the right words to say and they had all the knowledge of all the authors of their time and they had the scribes behind them. But their issue was that they judged too much. They judged others way too much. And he's telling us today, stop judging people. Don't focus on judging people so much. Focus more on loving people. Focus more on how to help somebody. Right away, we have that tendency to want to judge somebody when we first see it. The first appearance we get from them, we judge them and we walk the other way. When the Spirit's telling us, hey, can you spend a little bit more time with that person? I know he's not the same like you. I know he might not look like you. He might not dress like you. But can you help him in his life? Maybe he's going through something, a difficult trial in his life. Can you help that person? Can you go a little bit deeper with him? And that's what God's telling us. Don't worry so much about the splinter that's in your brother's eye when you got that big old giant 2x4 in your eye. Don't worry about it so much. I mean, that was a perfect analogy. Don't worry. Quit. Learn to love. Learn to be there for somebody. Learn to help people. These are just a few things that Jesus spoke about on his teaching on the mountain. Now, after he talks about not judging people, he says for us to enter into the straight path, into the straight and narrow path, into the gate that is straight and narrow. And then he says not many take that path, but majority of people take the broad path, the one that's easy to take. What is he saying? He's trying to challenge us. He's saying quit always taking the easy path. But every now and then we got to choose the harder path. We got to go further in our lives. That means that we have more challenges. Take on the challenge. Don't be afraid to take on the challenge. Don't be afraid to go deeper in your life. Don't be afraid to take the harder path. Why? Because when you pass through that straight and narrow path that hardly anybody takes, on the other side is your purpose. On the other side is success. And that's what he's trying to tell us. He said, hey, don't be like everybody else who takes the road, who makes those choices to take the broad path. He says, but take the one that's a little bit harder sometimes. Go a little bit deeper. Hey, sometimes trusting in the Spirit is not always the easiest thing to do. Sometimes trusting in the Spirit's difficult, but we choose to do it. Even though we're going through our darkest trials, even though we're going through things that we think we'll never get out. Sometimes it's difficult, but he says, hey, take that path. Don't worry about what people say around you. Trust in me and pray, and I'll help you. I'll get you out of it. I'll get you through this. Whatever the trial is that you're going through, take that difficult path. It's okay, and don't worry. He says, if you take these sayings of mine, if you do what I'm telling you to do, he said, I will liken him into a wise man. I will liken him to a man that builds his house upon a rock. He said, and when the storms come in your life, your house will not fall, but it will stand. But for those of us that don't take the sayings that Jesus is talking about on this mountain, he said, I'll liken him into a foolish man, where he builds his house upon the sand. And when you build your house upon the sand, it might look pretty in the beginning, but you built your house upon the sand. You built your house upon something that's not sturdy. You didn't take the sayings that Jesus was giving. You didn't take his advice. You didn't challenge yourself enough. And because you didn't do that, you took the broad path. And eventually, let a little time go by. And when that time goes by, eventually, the storm will come in. And when that storm comes in, it'll take that house out. And great of the fall will it be. But if you choose to take the sayings of Jesus, of what he taught on that mountain, you're on your path to greatness. And you're going to stand any storm. Give it time. Now you're probably asking, what does this have to do with the glory of God? We just went through all this. What does it have to do? Now, if you remember Moses, he asked to see his glory. He went to the Spirit and said, show me your glory. The Spirit told him, no man can see my face and survive. But he said, I can show you my backside. In other words, I can show you my residue, the residue of my glory. Obviously, we cannot see the direct face of God because we can't handle that. But he said, I can show you the residue of my glory. He said, but I got to take you to a place. He said, I'll take you and I'll put you on the rock. And when I put you on that rock, then you can see my glory. And he took Moses and he put him on that rock. And when he put him on that rock, the Bible says that the Spirit descended down upon Moses. And Moses spoke with him and he worshiped him. And he seen and he took on the glory of God. So much that when he came down the mountain, his face shined. It shined. The people saw it and he shined. He was able to experience the glory of God. Now there's a connection here. Moses on the rock. And Jesus said, if you follow my sayings and listen to what I just told you, in Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7, he said, I will liken him into a wise man who builds his house upon a rock. He builds his house upon a rock. He says, and when the storms come, your house will stand. And that is the steps to seeing the glory of God. Moses was on the rock. He stood on the rock and he experienced the glory of God so much that others seen it shine through him. You will experience the glory of God. A lot of times you say, Lord, I want to see your glory. And God says, yeah, I have the glory for you, but you got to prove to yourself. You got to go through some things. You got to love people. You got to quit worrying. He said, you got to quit judging people. And this has to be a part of you. Don't just take it as instruction, but make it a part of you. Make it a part of your life. Go through these things. Let some time go by. Can you handle the storms in life? Can you trust in my Spirit? Can you trust me? Then he will take you like he took Moses, and he'll place you on the rock. Then when others see you and they know what you go through and they see the trials that you go through, others will look at you and say, you're shining.